The soup barely had time to simmer before I heard the quick, heavy steps behind me. I didn't turn. I was reaching for the salt, eyes still on the pot, trying to remember if Julian preferred thyme or bay leaf. Then came the sting, a sharp metallic crack against the back of my head. My knees buckled slightly, and I caught myself on the edge of the stove. "You cook like a sad woman in a church basement," Dawn spat. "It's pathetic." I didn't speak. I didn't even look at her. I reached up slowly and touched the spot where the ladle had landed. It was warm, not bleeding, not broken, just loud and final. The kind of hit that doesn't bruise the skin so much as it stains the memory. From the living room, I heard the familiar chirp of the TV remote. The volume jumped. Some canned laughter echoed over the hallway. Julian, he was home. He heard everything. He always did. I stayed still, one hand hovering over the stove, the other gripping the handle of the ladle she'd thrown down beside me. It had clattered against the counter and landed at my feet. The soup still bubbled behind me, steam curling up toward the ceiling like nothing had happened. She walked away, muttering something about wasting groceries and old-fashioned nonsense. The bedroom door closed hard enough to rattle the plates in the cabinet. I waited. I waited for footsteps to approach, for Julian's voice, for anything, but the only sound was the TV, some game show, bells and cheering. I bent down, picked up the ladle. It was bent slightly at the neck now. I stood there for a long time, ladle in hand, staring at the tiled floor beneath my shoes. Then I turned off the stove. The soup wasn't ready anyway. Not really. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the hallway. My coat wasn't where I left it. Neither were my shoes. 3 months ago, I still had a front door of my own. It wasn't much, just a second-floor walk-up with a leaky faucet and a crooked blind in the kitchen. But it was mine. I had a morning routine. Black coffee in a chipped mug, jazz on the radio, sunlight pouring in through the east-facing window. I didn't bother anyone there. No one raised their voice. Nothing was ever thrown. When the building changed owners and raised the rent, I knew I couldn't keep up. I told Julian I'd figure something out. Maybe a small rental closer to the grocery store, something with a shared yard. But he insisted, "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Just come stay with us. It'll be easier this way. We've got room." Room. That first day, I arrived with 2 suitcases and a garment bag. Dawn didn't come to the door. She stayed upstairs while Julian moved my things into the guest room, if you could call it that. It was a converted office with a twin mattress pushed against the wall and a single wire hanger on the back of the door. Within a week, most of my clothes had been packed into a bin and shoved into the hall closet under the dog carrier and behind the vacuum. The rest hung in Julian's garage next to paint cans and a rusted folding chair. My sweaters smelled like pine-scented air freshener and plastic. So I moved quieter, woke up earlier, boiled water with the lid on to avoid the clatter. I learned to walk without making the floorboards creak. I waited for the dryer to finish before stepping into the laundry room. I never touched their coffee. Still, it wasn't enough. Last week, Dawn told me not to hum while I folded towels, said it gave her headaches. Julian just rubbed his temples and said, "Let's not start." I didn't say a word. I just stacked the towels and went back to my room, if it was still mine. The closet light had been removed. Julian used to call every Sunday right after church. Never missed a week. "Just checking in. Mom, you eat anything yet?" He'd tell me about his day, about work, about whatever car problem he was fixing in the garage. Sometimes he'd ask about the plant I kept on my balcony, the one he bought me for Mother's Day 5 years ago. A little potted fig I named Elliot. Now he sits at the counter while I cook, eyes glued to his phone, one leg bouncing. I asked him the other day if he still fixed things with his hands. He mumbled something about the shop being too busy and scrolled through videos while I stirred the stew. I tried gently to bring it up. "Julian, do you think Dawn is all right?" He didn't look up, just sighed. "She's just stressed. Don't take it personally." I didn't know how to explain that it wasn't just stress when someone throws out your shoes or yells because your soup doesn't smell like hers. That it wasn't stress when you get hit with a metal ladle and no one blinks. Instead, I said, "I'm trying not to get in the way." His phone buzzed. He nodded without looking at me. "It's fine, just give her space." That night, I heard them behind the bedroom door. Laughter. Real, full laughter. Not the polite kind for company, the kind that made the walls feel thin. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. It clicked on every third spin. That used to drive me mad in my apartment. I would get up and fix it with a screwdriver, muttering to myself about loose screws and cheap parts. Now I just listened to the rhythm. Click, click, silence. In my old place, I had plants. Basil, mint, the fig tree. Here, the only green thing is the bathroom hand soap. I closed my eyes and imagined the balcony again. The wind used to carry in the smell of someone else's laundry. Fresh, warm, like a life that was still mine. Then came the sound of the trash can in the kitchen slamming shut. The next morning, I reached for my little row of spice jars, ones I'd brought from my apartment because they made every kitchen feel familiar. The shelf was empty, the counter too. I opened the trash bin and saw them buried under coffee grounds and a wilted salad mix. They were all expired, Dawn said from behind me, tying her robe a little too tightly. And this isn't your kitchen. I don't want clutter. Clutter. 30 years of recipes reduced to clutter. I didn't argue. I picked up an onion, sliced it thin, and tried to pretend the sting in my eyes came only from the knife. When I served lunch, slow-cooked chicken, nothing fancy, she scraped half of it straight into the trash. Greasy, she said flatly. Julian, tell her we're trying to eat clean. Julian didn't look at me. He just waved a hand in front of his face. The house smells old. Mom, maybe cut back on whatever you're doing in here. Old, outdated spices, greasy food, clutter. It wasn't the ladle that hurt the most. It was the tiny cuts that kept coming after. That afternoon, while looking for my coat to take out the recycling, I couldn't find it in the closet, or my walking shoes, or the small container of vitamins I kept near the door. I searched through the hallway until I spotted a large plastic bag slumped beside the laundry basket. The label, written in thick black marker, read "Donate." Inside was everything of mine that wasn't nailed down. My coat, the one with the worn cuffs but warm pockets. My shoes with the memory foam insoles. Even my vitamins, the ones I bought on sale and stretched out for months. I lifted the bag, feeling my pulse in my palms. Dawn's laughter drifted faintly from upstairs. Julian's voice followed, low and tired, like he didn't want to be part of the conversation but wouldn't walk away from it either. I carried the bag back to my room and set it on the bed. The trash cans were still warm from being emptied, and the kitchen smelled like disinfectant. I stood there for a moment, listening to the house breathe around me, and began folding the bag open to see what else had disappeared. I packed the suitcase slowly, the way I used to fold laundry when Julian was small. Quiet, careful, hoping no one would wake up. A few blouses, 2 pairs of pants, my toothbrush wrapped in a paper towel. I didn't take much because I didn't have much left to take. Most of what was mine had already been tucked into that plastic donate bag, still sitting like a warning at the foot of my bed. I zipped the suitcase halfway before the door swung open. Dawn stood there, arms crossed, smirking. Running away like a child. Figures. You make a mess, then you bolt when someone calls you out. I didn't answer. I just pushed the zipper the rest of the way and lifted the suitcase off the bed. It felt heavier than it should have, or maybe I was just tired. I walked past her without meeting her eyes. At the front door, Julian stepped in front of me, not aggressively, more confused, as if he'd found a stray dog at the wrong doorstep. Mom, where are you going? Just wait until things calm down. Dawn didn't mean half the stuff she said. I almost laughed. Half? Which half? The part where she threw away my things, or the part where she hit me? I kept my hands on the suitcase handle. I'll find somewhere, I said softly. Julian rubbed his forehead. You don't need to do this. It's late. Just go to your room. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow. Everything was always tomorrow with him. I let go of the handle. The suitcase tipped slightly, leaning against my leg like a tired pet. I nodded, though nothing in me agreed, and walked back to my room. The hallway light flickered as I passed, humming in that way old bulbs do when they're close to burning out. That night, I sat on the bed with a packet of crackers I'd found at the bottom of my purse. Dawn's voice drifted through the walls. Julian's replies were short, low, apologetic. The soup I'd tried to make still sat in the pot downstairs, growing cold and thick on the stove. I took a piece of paper from the drawer and wrote a note. Just a few words. No accusations, no farewell. I didn't sign it. I crumpled it before the ink dried, dropped it into the wastebasket, and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it circled above me, waiting for what the next morning might bring. I waited until the house was quiet. Not silent, just quiet enough to feel alone. Julian's door had closed hours ago. I'd heard the usual rhythms, Dawn brushing her teeth too loudly, the sound of drawers slamming even when they didn't need to. I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to prepare. I reached for the suitcase again. Not to leave, at least not yet. I was looking for a safe place to hide my ID and a little cash. Somewhere Dawn wouldn't find it if she got curious. The lining of the suitcase had a tear near the seam. I'd stitched it once years ago, but it had come loose again. I slipped my fingers under the flap, feeling for space. That's when I touched the edge of something stiff, thick, folded. I pulled it out carefully. A yellowed envelope, slightly creased. My name, Tashina, scrawled across the front in handwriting I hadn't seen in a decade. Joseph's. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 2 cashier's checks, one large enough to make my breath catch, the other smaller, likely for living expenses. Beneath them, folded twice, was a copy of a property deed and a letter. Just a few lines. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I know they'll tell you to stay with them, to lean on family. But I also know you, Tashina. You don't ask for anything unless you have no choice. So I made one for you. I bought the Springfield place back under your maiden name. It's simple, but it's yours. You don't owe anyone comfort in exchange for cruelty, not even Julian. If they make you feel like a guest in your own life, leave. The key is taped to the back. I flipped the envelope over. There it was. A small silver key taped so precisely it hadn't shifted once in 10 years. I sat there for a long time, holding the envelope to my chest. The suitcase lay open beside me. No longer just a container of things, but a door to something I thought was gone. By morning, I had made a list of everything I needed to do. The next morning, I woke up before the sun and left before anyone stirred. I didn't say where I was going, and no one asked. At the county office, I handed over the deed with shaking hands. The clerk took one look, typed in the parcel number, and nodded. Yes, ma'am, that's a clear title. House is fully paid off and listed under your name. Well, your maiden name. You want to update that? I shook my head. Leave it. From there, I drove to a small realty office a few streets down and met with a woman named Serena. She was young but listened well. I gave her the key, told her I didn't want to sell, just needed repairs done before moving back in. Nothing fancy, I said. Just working plumbing, a clean coat of paint, and locks that close right. She scribbled notes, handed me a timeline, and promised to send photos of the work. I paid in advance with one of the checks. When she asked how I'd like to be contacted, I gave her an old email I hadn't used in years. No calls, no paper trail. The last stop was the moving company. I booked them for early morning. Quiet, respectful, no big trucks with flashing signs. I'll be packed, I told them. Just come take the boxes and go. Back at Julian's house, no one noticed. Dawn was out shopping or at her Pilates class. Julian was buried in work calls, pacing up and down the hall, earbuds always in. I came and went, invisible. That night, I made soup one last time. The good pot, not the scratched one Dawn liked. I stirred it slowly, measuring nothing, tasting as I went. I didn't care what they thought. I was cooking for myself, for memory. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. No one said a word. Dawn passed behind me, grabbed a drink from the fridge, and left without glancing over. I ladled a bowl and sat down at the counter. I didn't rush. I didn't apologize. I ate slowly, watching the steam rise, and thought about the morning when the truck would arrive. The thud came just after 6:00. I heard it from my room, one of the movers misjudging the turn in the hallway and bumping the fridge against the door frame. Nothing broke, no damage, just enough noise to wake the house. I didn't flinch. I was already dressed, suitcase zipped, coat folded neatly over my arm. By the time the second man wheeled the couch out through the front door, the house had stirred. Dawn's voice came first, muffled and sharp. Julian's followed, groggy and rising in confusion. I stepped outside and waited at the edge of the driveway as the truck backed in, blocking their cars. The cold air felt clean on my face. I could hear drawers opening upstairs, then heavy footsteps down the stairs. Julian burst out barefoot, one sock half off, shirt clinging to his chest. "Mom, what's going on?" Dawn was right behind him, hair tied up in a knot, robe flapping. "Is someone robbing us? What is this?" I didn't answer. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, a receipt dated and signed for the past month's utilities. I walked over and held it out. Julian took it automatically, still blinking hard, like he hadn't quite woken up yet. Dawn stepped closer. "You can't just... What are you doing with our fridge? Where's the couch?" I looked at her, then at Julian. Not a stare, not a challenge, just a pause. "I'm taking what's mine," I said simply. They stood there, unsure what to say. Julian opened his mouth, then closed it. The receipt crinkled in his hand. Dawn looked toward the truck, as if hoping someone else might appear with an explanation that made more sense than mine. But no one came, just the sound of boxes being loaded, taped, and stacked. I turned and walked back toward the truck. My room was already empty. The movers were wrapping the last chair. Inside, the soup pot was gone, the shelves bare. The house looked smaller somehow, lighter. I watched the men finish, nodded once, and stepped aside to let them through. The door stuck a little when I turned the key. Years of stillness will do that to a place. I leaned my shoulder into it gently, and it gave with a soft creak. I stepped inside and let the door fall shut behind me. The air smelled like dust and dry wood. I didn't mind. It smelled like possibility. I set my bag down in the front room. No one else's shoes to trip over, no hallway cluttered with someone else's life, just a room waiting to be claimed again. I moved from window to window, unlatching each one and pushing them open. The breeze slipped in slowly, carrying the quiet hum of the street outside. I could hear a dog bark down the block, a delivery truck idling, leaves brushing the porch. The floor creaked beneath my steps, familiar in a way that brought tears to my eyes, not from sadness but recognition. These were the sounds of my life, not echoes in someone else's house. The cabinets needed wiping down. The faucet dripped. I ran my hand along the counter, brushing off a thin layer of dust. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the cast-iron pot. I set it gently on the stove. I filled it with water, peeled a few carrots I'd brought in a brown paper bag, chopped an onion. There was no one behind me telling me it smelled old or greasy or wrong. No one sighing into their phone, no footsteps pacing past with a frown, just the soft rhythm of a knife on wood, the bubbling of water starting to warm, and the tick of the stove. When the broth began to simmer, I pulled out a chair and sat down. No shouting from upstairs, no television blaring over my shoulder, just soup and space and the quiet kind of warmth that makes a person remember who they are. I reached for a spoon, took a slow taste, and let it rest on my tongue as if it were the first bite I'd ever been allowed to enjoy. The soil out front was hard, but I didn't mind. The tulip bulbs fit nicely into the pockets I dug, 3 rows, staggered, just like Joseph used to do. It was the kind of work that settled the nerves and left a quiet ache in your back. The good kind, the kind that told you something was growing, even if you couldn't see it yet. I stood, brushed the dirt from my gloves, and reached for my phone. A single message blinked on the screen.
"Julian, are you okay?"
The words sat there, simple and thin, no punctuation, no follow-up. I read it once, then again. I thought about the time he scraped his knee on the playground and came running to me with both arms out, the same arms that had blocked the door when I tried to leave. I thought about the way he turned up the volume while I stood in silence, soup cooling behind me. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned the phone over and slid it onto the porch table. I gathered the last of the empty pots, washed my hands at the kitchen sink, and towed off my shoes by the door. The small radio I'd unpacked last week crackled to life with a twist of the dial. Old tunes, soft and steady. Nothing fancy, just enough to fill the corners of the house without crowding them. The soup on the stove was warm again, gently simmering. I lifted the lid, gave it a stir, then left it be. It would wait for me. At the table, I opened a new notebook. The pages were blank, thick and smooth under my fingers. I didn't know what I would write yet. Maybe a list, maybe a memory, maybe just my name in full, the way it was printed on the deed. I picked up a pen, tapped it lightly against the margin, and looked out the window. The tulips would bloom in spring. The house was holding heat now. The silence wasn't empty anymore.